Okay, so thank you, Victoria, for joining me here on Spotlight Series. I'm excited to chat with you and learn a little bit about your background and your history leading up to your current role at Songtradr. So, to kick us off, can you just introduce yourself and share a little bit about yourself personally?
Sure. I'm Victoria Wilshire. I'm based in LA, and as you can probably hear, I'm an Aussie born and bred. I've been in LA since 2013, and it's home now, and I'm loving it.
Sure. So I'm gonna dive right in, and I'm gonna say before we even talk a little bit about your background and where you came from, can you tell me a little bit about what your current role is? What is a chief people officer? What is Songtradr? Give us a little context.
Well, I'm currently sitting in the Chief People Officer seat, which means that I oversee our HR and talent function. And that incorporates how we hire, engage, develop, manage, and retain our people, and as much as possible, how we have good levers as well. Not so typically. I also oversee our internal comms function, which I brought across from my previous roles where I was working in content design and communications. As for who we are, Songtradr is a music licensing marketplace which connects music rights holders with brands, apps, digital platforms, content creators, and fans who wish to license and buy music.
So you were telling me a little bit about your kind of your origin story here as a you were a musician.
Yes, that's right. I started out my career in Australia in the music industry as an artist, and some of the highlights are that I was signed to Sony Music in a group called Culture Shock. I then transitioned to become an independent music artist and learned quite a bit about the industry that way. Following that, I flipped onto the other side and became a songwriter and producer with my partner then, who is now my husband, Paul. And together we worked a lot with renowned Australian artists, many from Australian Idol, which was all the rage at that time. I guess I'm dating myself right now. And then we subsequently had a bi country existence where we worked in LA as well as Melbourne in Australia, working on music production. And one of the highlights from that was that we ended up getting a placement on the Backstreet Boys album Never Gone. Working with five people at the top of their game is quite a fantastic opportunity and experience.
Can you tell me about the leap of going from kind of following your passion, being a musician, whatever, side of it you were on, to being an entrepreneur? Is that always something you knew you were going to do, or was it spur of the moment and opportunistic and there was just a moment and you took it? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's such an interesting question. I think that if you have entrepreneurial tendencies, you've probably always had them. Even as an artist, I was setting up bands, getting gigs, putting on shows, getting that producer hat on. And so it felt like a natural transition for me to go from the artist side over to the producing and music business side of things. And like many of us, when you hit your 30s, you suddenly start asking those big grown up questions. What am I doing with my life? What am I putting down for the long haul so I can eat in the future as well? And you start having kids. And like many entrepreneurs would know that um, growing a viable business out of a startup means that you have to dedicate pretty much every waking moment to making that happen. And so, yeah, work life balance. What was that?
So tell me a little about the evolution of Songtradr. So you've made this move into Songtradr. It happens naturally. It's just an organic transition from one to the other. What are the major inflection points in the story of Songtradr as a business? Where did it come from? What were these major big like, oh, maybe we're onto something here moments?
Right. Well, the inspiration for the idea of Songtradr came from solving a problem that was very personal and relevant for us as music producers. much like any artist, like a filmmaker, a writer, or a painter, you tend to generate a lot of content. And in our case, it was tracks, and those tracks sat on hard drives. And so it was at that time that Paul came up with that idea of a beautiful licensing marketplace for music. And much like having kids, though, you don't really know what you're getting into until you get into it. From there, it became a progression of many learning moments, building new features, growing our capabilities, expanding our offering, and bringing in new expertise when we needed it and when it made sense, and making a lot of mistakes. But 10 years on, we're still going and growing, and that's fantastic.
Do you have kids? You've mentioned a few times parenthood.
Yeah, that's right. When you have kids, they become a big part of your life. I have two strapping lads, both musicians and content makers. They both have their father's height, not mine, thank goodness. And one's 17, the other 18. I think they call them Irish twins when they're that close together.
No, that's wonderful. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old in a startup, so I can relate to a lot. In the thick of it.
Okay. Are you sleeping?
No. Or at least my standards for what count as a reasonable night's sleep have crashed. And so if I get 6 hours, 6.5 hours, I'm like, I'm good to go.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That doesn't change for quite a while, but good luck. Kind of similar stories here.
it's good. It makes you better, I think.
Gosh, oh my gosh, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So tell me about Songtradr today. What does the company look like today? How many employees are you? Kind of where is the growth happening? And what are you excited about?
Songtradr is around 400 globally now, and that's a result of organic growth as well as growth through acquisition, of which we've done 10 to date. And that's 10 over 4 years, which is quite a journey. Uh, and Songtradr now has a really solid platform. And I'm very excited to say that we have some very smart, dedicated, creative, and passionate people working in our teams now. A big part of what we're doing is stepping through the phases of integration following an acquisition. And that acquisition always comes with its own sets of systems, processes, and people and subcultures. We've discovered through doing so many of these that it is really important to integrate those systems where you need to communicate and collaborate very efficiently. Getting everyone into the same workspace means that you can actually start having those very important conversations early on to get everyone working in the same ways, and identifying where any of the gaps or critical issues that you need to solve before you can continue growing. And if you don't do that integration, what you find is that the walls of those silos continue to get higher and higher over time, and that creates inefficiencies which can be quite costly.
Do you feel if you were to think back to kind of the earlier days of the business when the business maybe and the company itself were more fragile, or you think about it now today where it's a much more solid business, but also you have 400 people plus or minus relying on the success of the business, where do you feel where was the most intense feeling, or was it kind of is it completely different, like where maybe you can like share a little bit about how it felt to be at those stages, now growth, kind of scale up stage, bigger aspirationally global team, really exciting, lots of things going on. I don't know, more pressure, more what? There's got to be some down. There's got to be some opposing force there as well. Versus, earlier stage, maybe scrappy, exciting, lots of ideas happening, but very fragile. So can you maybe speak to that a little bit?
That's a really great question. And actually, it's always been intense. In the early stages, as you likely know, being in a startup yourself, is that there's a lot to do. There's a lot of jumping around, helping each other out, being scrappy. It's fresh and exciting, and you're constantly breaking down new frontiers. And so perhaps you don't really know how fragile things are. In the early stages, you're making decisions that impact a dozen people, maybe a couple dozen people. But now, if you're making decisions, they impact hundreds of people. And not only that, you have cross cultural implications as well, because what you're cascading to one country may not actually translate the right way into another country. So it's very important to open up those channels of communication and make sure that people feel comfortable enough to bring any feedback through, so that you can continue to iterate and improve the way that you're messaging to people. I'm also very pleased to say that I believe we still have a balance of both, where we've needed to put a lot of rigor around the systems and processes that we have globally so that we can scale effectively. But also, we haven't lost a lot of that scrappy entrepreneurial mindset, where people are still helping each other out and collaborating around the world all the time. And we try to maintain um, a degree of agility so that we can move quickly to answer the needs of a very fast moving industry. And from a talent perspective at Songtradr, it's a very exciting environment because we're creating new roles all the time. So if you join us in one role, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the role you're going to remain in right through your journey with us.
Two more questions for you. First one is what? So you're currently, you said, acting as chief people officer or sitting in that seat. What is success in that role? Like, what is, if you're wildly successful in this role that you have right now? What does that look like to you?
Wildly successful. I love that. Makes me think of living with abandon, you know. Um, to be wildly successful as a chief people officer is, for me, is to know that I've built a very robust global function that is supporting the needs of the business, and answering the needs of the people as well, where we have incredible talent in every role around the world. And not only that, is that we're bringing in transformational and innovative programs that perhaps might be a very interesting place for people to want to come and work. In terms of being successful at Songtradr, because I also recognize that success means different things at different companies. For us, though, one of the things is having enough confidence to know that you don't have to be the absolute expert in everything while you're in your role. It's okay for others to also be the experts. Take me, for example. I came from that artist and then content design communication space. And I ended up working in a role where I had to build a team and bring in people who knew a lot more about HR than I did. And that can be a scary thing, you know, because you're supposed to be leading the way for them. That means that you also have to have good judgment, good business sense and instincts, and make decisions that can potentially fly in the face of tradition, because things have been done a certain way for many years. It doesn't mean that they have to be done the same way going forward. And that again speaks to that innovative and entrepreneurial mindset that I've mentioned previously. More generally, I think it's really important for you to always try to keep your walls down and be vulnerable. Always be learning, because as we all know, that learning can come from anywhere. Um, and very importantly, you must be able to drive impact in your role, being able to identify what the problem is, where the gaps are, what the solutions are that are viable for the business and realistic, and that will bring the biggest value and return for yourself as the individual who's developing in their career, as well as for the business. You know, there are a lot of people who like to use buzzwords, and I have no problem with buzzwords. In fact, I use a lot of them myself. But the reason why I bring it up is because I used to get quite intimidated by people who had all the buzzwords. And I would think, wow, you're so eloquent and you know so much more than I do. But over time, what I learned is that the buzzwords don't necessarily translate into results. Um, and you shouldn't let those insecurities and imposter syndromes kick in when you start hearing that kind of talk. It really is all about um, knowing what you're bringing to the table, being able to bring those results with diligence, passion, and dedication, regardless of how many buzzwords you know or use.
I couldn't agree more. I think that buzzwords for a lot of people are a crutch because they're concerned about their own self perception and their own image of maybe their worth or quality or ability to do their job or whatever it might be, and then they use buzzwords to puff up to make themselves feel and sound really smart when they're covering up for maybe some thing that they wish they could be a little bit better at. So last question for you here. So I usually try and conjure some a profile here. We'll use for you some musician who's in their 20s right now or 30s, and they're out there in the world, and they're super passionate, and they've had some amount of success, but they're also not sure what the future holds, and they're not sure if this is a lifelong pursuit that they're in right now, or if they might need to transition to something a little bit more stable. What would be your message to them? Because that's the path you went down, and I'm sure you were sitting at that point at some point and thinking like, what's going on here? What is the future? What would you say to that person if you could meet them today?
Oh gosh, Jeremy, that's a tough question for me because I don't necessarily think that I am the poster person for giving incredible advice. But if someone out there hears what I have to say and it can help them in their journey, then that's an amazing thing. Really, though, I've just tried to put one foot in front of the other and make the best decisions that I could with what I had every step of the way. But if I had to say something, I would say that it's really important to know what you want out of life, to identify truly what you want to do, what makes you happy, where your passion truly lies. And I know that that's not a genius thing to say by any stretch of the imagination, but after many decades on this planet, I can very confidently say that it takes a lot of little steps to get where you want to go. And so you want to make sure that you're stepping in the right direction. Yeah, doing something that is going to bring you that fulfillment and get you excited and truly happy to get out of bed every morning. Understand what every lesson and every new piece of information and challenge is bringing to you. Learn from that and know that it is all actually building you to a higher purpose. Be open to learning, be vulnerable, always challenge yourself, and don't take yourself so seriously like I did.
Wonderful, Victoria. I really appreciate it. I think on that's the perfect note to wrap our conversation here. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm looking forward to getting this out there.
Really great to be here, Jeremy. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.